So in a previous video, we talked about bacterial growth in relation to temperature. And in that video, I referenced that certain nutrients are required for bacterial growth. And in this video, we're going to look at oxygen as that nutrient. You'll see here that I have 5 test tubes. And in each of those test tubes, there's some type of cultural media that allows for bacterial growth. And that media just has different nutrients in it. But we're going to focus on oxygen. And what I want to point out is that here at the top, where the culture media meets the atmospheric oxygen, this is where oxygen is going to be highly concentrated. So keep that in mind. When we look at bacteria, they can be categorized into really 2 main categories. They are going to either be aerobic bacteria or anaerobic bacteria, sometimes referred to as either aerobes or anaerobes, but we can actually break those down into 5 more distinguished categories. So let's start off with the first one, and that first one is going to be the obligate aerobes. So with these obligate aerobes, they actually need oxygen to survive. So you'll see that in this test tube, the growth of that bacteria is going to be right here at the top where that oxygen is most concentrated. So examples of this would be the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. You find that most predominantly in the lungs of the human body, which makes sense because that's where you're going to see a lot of oxygen. The next category is going to be what we call facultative aerobes. Now, these guys, these types of bacteria, they don't actually need oxygen to survive. They can grow in conditions or areas where there's not a lot of oxygen. However, they do typically thrive in areas where there is a high concentration of oxygen, which is why you see that the majority of them are growing here where the oxygen is concentrated, but you'll also see that there is some growth as you go further down into the test tube in those areas where there are low concentrations of oxygen. An example of this would be E. coli. That type of bacteria would fall into this facultative aerobe category. The third one is going to be the obligate anaerobes. And so these guys grow better without oxygen. So you'll see that the predominant, or really all of the growth, is going to take place at the bottom of that test tube. And in fact, if oxygen is present, then it can actually become toxic to these bacteria and they won't be able to survive. So you're never going to see any growth of those types of bacteria, those obligate anaerobes, in that concentrated area of oxygen. If you move on to the fourth one, that is going to be the aerotolerant anaerobes. So let me write that up. Aerotolerant anaerobes. And these guys, they can actually grow with oxygen present or without oxygen present. They really don't need it, makes no difference to them, doesn't cause any harm, they don't have to have it. You'll find some of this bacteria in your GI tract or in the vaginal area in humans. And so you'll see that that growth is really going to take place in any area of that culture within that test tube. The final one that I want you to consider are the microaerophils. Or microaerophiles, I should say. And with these types of bacteria, they actually do need oxygen to grow, but they don't need the concentrated levels of oxygen that you might find near the atmosphere. They need that concentration to be a little bit less in terms of oxygen. So you're going to see the growth just beneath this line. And I should point out that when we're looking at this line, remember that here at the top, you're gonna have a high level of oxygen, and this is the molecular symbol for oxygen, whereas here at the bottom, it's going to be very low oxygen. So again, in this situation with these microaerophiles, they're gonna grow somewhere here in the middle within this band. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about bacteria and how they grow in the presence of oxygen.